Welcome to APREA Real Assets TV and our ESG series. My name is David Fogarty. I'm the head of ESG Consulting and Sustainability Services for CBRE and your host for today's session topic, which is on smart and sustainable buildings. I'm joined by some very esteemed guests that are active in this space for what will be a lively and informative session on a topic that is driving a lot of conversation and action in the real estate sector. It's a fascinating subject. After all, we spend most of our lives in buildings, and technology is changing real estate at a very fast pace, together with the drive to adopt sustainable and ESG principles into the built environment. Firstly, let me welcome our guests. Tommy Crowley, Global Director APAC at WiredScore, Darren Teo, Vice President of Group Sustainability at Capital Land, and Dushyant Ahuja, Vice President of Asset Management for Tyler Realty and Infrastructure Limited. Dushyant, Darren and Tommy, welcome to APREA Real Assets TV, and thank you for joining for today's discussion. So let's get right into the topic and get the conversation going. So Tommy, I'll kick it off with yourself. Let's start off with a definition of what is a smart building. And can you tell us what are the benefits? And as a follow-on question, why do you think there's greater demand for smart, sustainable buildings today?
So I think that the definition to start with is really important. Smart's become such a buzzword in the industry, but it doesn't really mean anything to anyone. And so this is actually something we set out as a company to solve. It must be 3 years ago now. We gathered sort of 90 leading landlords, developers, occupiers, and other stakeholders in the industry, and did thousands of hours of qualitative research with them to come up with a definition for the industry. And the important thing about the definition is it's very outcome centric. So it's not about technology for technology's sake. Smart technology, it doesn't mean anything unless it's delivering meaningful outcomes for people. So our definition is that a smart building is one that delivers outstanding outcomes for all users. And the 4 outcomes that the whole thing gears towards is a really inspirational, frictionless, convenient, seamless experience in the building. The second is a sustainable building, and I'm sure we'll dive way more into that today. The third is a cost-efficient building. So if you can optimize your systems and you can save on labor and you can save on energy and other things. And then finally, the future-ready building. So how can you use technology to help that asset remain resilient and resolve with time? And we support that definition with a range of kind of use cases, so everyday problems that a user of a building might face, and then kind of what we call technological foundations. But what I really mean by that is the technology infrastructure, the systems, the processes, the policies you have in place to deliver on that. So that's sort of our definition. I think when you come to the benefits, they're very closely linked, right? So firstly, how do you create an environment that people actually want to be in? I'm sure we'll talk about all asset classes today, but if you think about the office, we have a choice about whether we go into the office, and how can technology help make that environment more suited to my needs, more convenient? How can we, another benefit is obviously sustainability. You know, we're seeing even existing assets today delivering 10 to 20% energy efficiency savings using technology, for example. Or can we use technology to improve air quality? Can we use it to deliver a number of other outcomes? And cost efficiency we touched on as well. I think the macro question then sort of answers itself around like, why is there more demand? I think my personal view on that is, if we look at everything that's happening globally at the moment, I don't think there's ever been a more complicated time to manage, develop, manage or develop really commercial real estate. COVID-19 accelerated a number of trends that we've seen, you know, hybrid working, focus on sustainability, focus on more healthy environments. And the result of that is we're seeing a really polarized market, right? We've been talking about this flight to quality for quite a long time now, but it's still ongoing and will continue to be ongoing. And so we now face a situation where the developers who embrace technology in order to deliver more sustainable, more healthy, and more user-centric spaces will come out as winners, and they'll have fuller buildings. It all links back to real estate economics. You need full spaces that you're able to charge high rents for, and they'll be able to charge more money for it. So that's where I think the demand is coming from. We've gone from a world where it was why would I create a smart building to not why, but you know, when, and I think that's kind of the macro change here.
Fantastic, Tommy. That's great. Dushyant, to bring you to the conversation, what are some good examples across APAC of smart buildings, and what do you think they can do?
I think smart buildings are gaining more and more traction across the world, and APAC is no exception. I would even venture to say that most new Grade A buildings have at least some smart features. It's not everything, but yes, something or the other is always there in all the new buildings. When it comes to examples, I think the first one that comes to mind is the Glumac in Shanghai. It focuses a lot on the health of the occupants. They've got IoT sensors that analyze air quality levels. And all of this data then passes through an AI layer, which manages air conditioning and ventilation systems and adjusts everything so that you have a more healthier air and a more healthier atmosphere within the building. I would say another one that comes to mind is Capital Towers in Singapore. And they use a lot of smart energy systems like heat recovery wheels, motion detectors, condensate collections, CO monitoring, just to name a few. Here in India, Ramanujan Intelligent Park, Chennai comes to mind. In addition to, sorry, that's our smart features there.
Yeah.
My light goes off. In addition to energy saving initiatives like solar passive design, series counterflow chillers, and heat recovery wheels, they are employing an AI layer over the CCTV systems. It allows them to, for automatic intrusion of alerts, forecasting of traffic patterns, and even vehicle recognition for entry to the parks. And I'm sure there are many more and new ones coming up every year. I think these are the three that come up to the forefront right now.
Excellent, Dushan. Thank you for that. Darren, still on the topic of smart buildings, have you seen them evolve over the years? What are some of the things to look out for when selecting the technology to make a building smarter? If you could maybe share some examples you've come across in your experience.
I think, buildings definitely have evolved rapidly over the years. I mean, 20, 25 years ago, when you have a BMS in your building, everyone go, great, you're amazing. But it's kind of like the bare minimum now, right? So it's like, it's a must have. But what I think is important now, is having a system like a BMS that's able to then be the backbone of, a few other different systems that we're currently adopting. So, from energy efficiency, system that deals with energy efficiency down to what Dushan was mentioning earlier on IoT for health and well-being and so on and so forth. So that's a huge change from a tech perspective. So from experience, what I would typically look out for, and I was quite lucky over my career to have done quite a few technology and tested quite a few. Firstly, I would look at the implementation, right? How easy it is to adopt. So for buildings, whether it's existing, whether it's new, when you have the opportunity to do a BMS, because that's the backbone, you need to start thinking about future state, right? Can I put in a system that I can just utilize a BMS information without having to do too much changes, right? BMS will last you 10 years, so you at least, 10, 15, 20 years, so you should at least think of that time frame. Secondly is the scalability of the technology. The last thing I want is to have 3, 4, 5 different technologies in the building. So, for example, you can put in a fault detection and diagnostic system or analytics or FDD. Well, can this be used as a reporting tool, right? It's not just looking at the energy efficiency of the building, but can it be used as a reporting tool? Can it grow to cover the whole portfolio of 10, 15, 20 buildings, like a bit of a national operations center, so to speak? And lastly is whether it can grow to be like maybe an AR, augmented reality, take a phone, scan it across a chiller, and then pop up all the chiller information, service reports, and so on and so forth. Lastly, I think this is probably the most important thing when I look at selecting technology is the team, the service provider, right? Like how open are they in receiving feedback? Are they constantly evolving to make their product better? Are they engaged? Not only just with, let's say, if I'm the one that's pushing for it, there's no point engaging with me. They have to engage with the team that's doing the work, right? So are they engaged and are they knowledgeable enough to help you solve a problem? So I think this, through, last couple of years, having the opportunity to implement certain technology, I think these are some of the things I would look at. Unfortunately, some technologies are great, but when it comes to engagement, you don't get that buy-in from the operations team, and that's when you lose out and the tech, even though it's great, but it just doesn't give you the results that you can achieve.
And I guess that's one of the challenges as well, as the education and training from not just your own people, but the supply chain as well, in terms of what ESG and sustainability you're trying to achieve. Look, I'll pose this question to all of you, but and it kind of goes off the back of what you're saying there, Darren. Like, what are the challenges you're seeing owners struggle with when delivering the smart buildings, and what tips would you propose to mitigate this? Maybe Tommy, if you could lead off on this.
Yeah, sure. I think actually Darren's highlighted a lot of them already, right? On the flip side of his advice are the challenges people are facing. I think at the sort of overarching level with existing buildings, so people look at new developments, they're like, fine, easy, I've got a blank canvas, I know where to start. And people are really struggling with where to start from an existing building, and to do it in a cost efficient way. I don't have the fix all solution for that in a couple of sentences, but I think the key, my tip would be there, is prioritizing outcomes. People go on a journey of saying, I want a smart building, but what do you actually want your building to do? And let's work backwards from that and then work out what you need, because you may not need as full a suite of technology as you really believe. So that's the first thing. I think the second thing people really struggle with related is cost and ROI. Technology is expensive. It will become less expensive over time, but it is currently quite expensive. My personal view on that is we've got to take more of a life cycle view of these assets. We can't be making a decision, for the life cycle of a CEO or the next 3 to 5 years. We've got to be looking at, okay, if I believe that this asset's going to stand the test of time, just in the same way that I need a new fancy lobby or a new fancy facade for my building, I also need to make sure that the building remains technologically relevant, and of course be factoring in my business case not only the energy efficiency savings and the people savings, but also my potential rental upside or the risk of downside if I don't do this and my surrounding buildings do. Then I think you come on to the implementation challenges that Darren's alluding to, right? Of like, firstly, implementation ease. How easily can I get this done? Will it work with my other systems? Interoperability is a challenge we see people struggling with all the time. They buy into these fancy sort of big whole suite solutions, and then they can't plug and play other things. And technology is moving really, really fast. And so the key there is always making sure that you've got the right strategy in place when it comes to how your systems are going to link up, and you have an integrator, either a person in your company who's responsible for that, or a company you're working with, to really pull all these systems together and make sure they speak to each other. And then I think the final thing that I would probably touch on is the piece that Darren already touched on, which is around this collaboration piece. We have all the technology we need. Well, we don't. I'm sure technology will continue to evolve. What do I mean by that? The technology we have available today is very sophisticated, and we are not leveraging it to its full potential, because we don't yet know how to get all the insights and all of the actions out of the data. We're not yet joining up all of that data between different stakeholders in the ecosystem. We're not yet partnering enough with our solution providers. So there's just so much more we can achieve by collaborating better together. And so I think it's taking a very open approach to technology implementation, the way that you're partnering with those solution providers, as Darren described, but also crucially in commercial office buildings, partnering with your tenants and having a kind of open sharing policy, and what can you write into leases around partnerships around that to enable you to really leverage and get the full benefits.
Fantastic. Dishant, do you want to add on to this?
Certainly. I think Tommy's covered most of the bits, but I would say the primary challenge that I face is to convince my investors and stakeholders on the viability of these systems, the financial viability of these systems. If I go on purely on an ROI basis, most of the bleeding edge systems are either not viable or have not been proven. So the way I've been dealing with it is I keep setting up small size pilots that once I can prove their efficacy, we can scale up. The other issue that I see is, especially on older assets, so we've been implementing newer technologies or newer systems as and when we see problems or newer technologies. But being able to integrate all of those together without replacing everything, that's a huge challenge. That's something that I'm still struggling with. You don't have open access on all. You have multiple systems which just don't talk to each other. And that's a challenge that we really need to face and look out for.
Absolutely, couldn't agree more. Darren, if I can ask you this one, what do you see as the link between a smart building and a sustainable one?
And I think, for me, like I mentioned earlier, BMS used to be like, oh yeah, you got a BMS, you're great. I mean, buildings are designed for 50, 60 years, right? And as things evolve, as technology evolve, your building needs to continue to evolve as well. It's still the same shell, but to continue to be competitive, smart building would definitely, smart system would definitely be part of the solution. Like for me, you need technology to mitigate climate change, right? Very straightforward. Our net zero strategy, technology plays a big part, and no different for buildings as well. It will be one of the big ecosystem to achieve that. So there's definitely a very close link between a smart building and a sustainable one. How can you make sure that your building that was built 20 years ago would still be relevant for the next 30 years to tenants that are getting more sophisticated as well, right? Tenants nowadays are getting more sophisticated, they are getting more educated. They have their own target, they have their own ambitions, they have their own operating policies and procedures and processes. And if you're not being a smart building, I think you'll just lose out. Sooner or later, either you get a big, what we call brown discount on your asset. And then over time, like you mentioned earlier, David, you got a stranding asset, most likely, right? So, I mean, your building can have, let's just say it can be you can say that, oh, my building has just reduced energy by 20, 21, 25%. Wow, you need technology to do that. I mean, you can get someone to walk around maybe, but that person might get you 10%, right? So that's where I think the technology would come in, not just on energy side, but like what Dushan mentioned earlier, health and well-being, massive topic at the moment. All these fire safety systems. So I think technology definitely plays a massive part.
And Tommy, you see that yourself as well. The link between smart building and sustainable one is really, really happening at the moment.
Yeah, 100%. I think Darren summarized that really nicely. I always say, you can't improve what you can't measure. And so that measurement piece is really where technology comes into play. And then at the more sophisticated end, once you can measure, how can you layer data sets to optimize, automate that optimization, et cetera, et cetera. But crucially also, technology is a really key engagement tool. So Darren was already alluding to proving to your tenants that you've improved your sustainability, but also thinking about live engagement. We had a great example building, actually. It's a smart score, one of our certifications, our smart building certifications, a smart score gold building in London by Skanska. It's called 50 Moorgate. And it's one of the best I've seen where they pulled genuinely all of their systems into one login, like really genuinely all their systems into one login. But what they've done really well is the tenant engagement piece that goes with that. So the systems are able to say, hey, David, I noticed you're in a meeting room with only one person staying. You'd actually booked the room for 10 people. So we'd optimize the air and everything to suit 10 people. I'm going to send you a notification to your phone to say, actually, we think there's just one person in there, judging by the occupancy sensor. Would you like to turn down the air conditioning to save on energy? So actually, you can see the potential of technology as we go over time will almost enable, I don't want to use the word gamification, but motivation, inclusion, everyone getting on this sustainability journey together from a kind of carbon perspective as well. And then as Darren alluded, there's so many other kind of softer benefits from technology to just genuinely create better spaces for people that are important when you think about the S in the ESG.
Yeah, absolutely. Dushan, I might ask you this one. How can building owners and tenants really work together to maximize their sustainability goals?
Definitely. So the way I see it is tenants are getting more and more sophisticated. Even new RFPs that we're seeing, they're coming up with green initiatives that they want. On the other hand, we've also started to include green clauses in our leases, where we want tenants to employ more efficient infrastructure in place, where we want them to install IoT sensors, which connect to our systems as well, so that the background can fully, the backend infrastructure can work with them together. On the other hand, so most of my buildings are currently being certified by WELL right now. And we're working with clients to bring in WELL certification to their interiors as well. We're helping them set up new infrastructure. We're working with them to upgrade their ventilation systems. So all of that is something which I believe it's more of a regular ongoing conversation that you need to keep happening with all the clients for it to really work and bring together sustainability as a function for everyone.
That's great, Dishant. Can I actually also ask you, if you don't mind, like you've got the first IFC Edge certified zero carbon asset in India. Can you elaborate a little bit about how you went about it and some of the technologies that you're working on to reduce your carbon footprint, and how effective are they?
This is one project that I'm extremely proud to be associated with. This is Ramanujan Intellian Park in Chennai. And we've taken a variety of steps to reach this goal. It actually started all the way back at the design stage. This is a 10-year-old building, and it was futuristic even at that time.
Yeah.
We had implemented solar passive design features, the building orientation, the glazing, the way we've got strip glazings and punched hole glazings on different facades. They've been specifically designed to reduce the heat gain from sunlight. Chennai has two basic weather types, hot and hotter. So this is one of the most important things where we could save energy in the entire building. In addition to that, we have energy efficient fixtures. We have power regeneration from our elevators. So all of this actually brings up almost 42% energy savings over a typical building.
Fantastic.
In terms of water, we've got recycling from highly efficient membrane STPs. We've got rainwater harvesting, condensate recovery, and water efficient faucets.
Yeah.
These bring in about 28 to 30% savings over a typical building. And finally, we procure almost 98% of our electrical energy through renewable sources, both on-site as well as off-site. And this, I'm glad, so this is something that the government of Tamil Nadu has allowed us to do, where the other state governments are still in the process of setting up these guidelines that would allow us to do that. Basically, all of this combined with a small purchase of carbon offsets, I believe we've done around 2,800 carbon credits for the whole year. Brought Ramanujan Intellian Park into a net zero status.
Fantastic. I'd love to come and see it someday. It sounds fantastic. Darren, starting with yourself and your experience, and maybe comments from Tommy and Dishant on what do you think? What else could existing buildings do to be both smart and sustainable?
I believe it's all about planning, right? I think it's all about how you, like I mentioned earlier, right? How do you future-proof the building for the next 10, 15, 20 years, right? But at the same time, there's also that about, existing buildings, knocking it down, rebuild it again. I don't think that's a long-term solution from a sustainability perspective, especially if the same asset type, knocking down an office, building another office, right? So I think adaptive reuse of an existing building is definitely a more sustainable solution. And through that, obviously, you can then put in, smarter solutions, better solutions, and things like that. And, one of the best example of adaptive reuse of a building is Key Quarter Tower in Sydney. It's probably one of the best, or one of the largest, I would say, knocking down 1/3, expand another from 50,000 square meter NLA to 90,000 NLA. Wow. And 2/3 of it is an existing structure of a building built in 1970s, right? So it's an amazing building. I was quite lucky to work on it before I joined CapitaLand. And yeah, through that, there's some constraint, there's no doubt. You're working, 2/3 of the building is existing structure. But through some smart engineering and things like that, we basically embarked on that journey to say that this is a building that has to be smart, in terms of management of the building, in terms of, health and well-being of occupants and so on and so forth. But yeah, it's again, just to repeat myself again, it's all about planning. I think it's about being smart as an operator, by making the right decision in the life cycle of the building. And for technologies that you put in, in your building to be a smart building, you have to think about how easy that you can replace them as technology evolves. As Tommy mentioned earlier, it's moving so fast, right? The last thing you want, you put in a system and it's like, well, I can't change it in the next 10 years, or I have to strip to the gut in the next, if I want to change it to something else, right? I guess that's what I personally feel, that, you know, for an existing buildings, you know, that's how you would kind of try to go smart and sustainable.
Absolutely, absolutely. Tommy, Deshant, any tips from yourself?
I think Darren's on the money with the planning perspective, as always. Darren, I also have to say, whenever I'm in Sydney, I go for a run along Barangaroo and round the bridge, and I just love, as you run around the corner, kind of looking up at Quay Quarter Tower. It's such a great icon now in the harbour. It looks awesome. Sorry, that was complete divergence. In answer to your question, David, I think planning definitely, but I think if you thought about, if I just have an existing building and I'm not going through a big upgrade program, and it may not be a grade A asset and my budget is small, what can I do? Which is often the really difficult thing. And in that case, I'd be saying, okay, what systems do you have today? Do you have a BMS of some form? Most buildings do, not all. And what can you do to start with, just to make that data readable? For example, there are some data cleanup you can do so that you can start to spot patterns and optimize, even smaller things like that. You know, then could you layer some sensors over that if you had some kind of analytics tool to pull those together? And so I think the first thing is just to really understand what your baseline is and what you can do with what you have today. And probably need some help from a consulting perspective on that, and then start to think about how you can layer and enrich those data sets to improve outcomes if you haven't got the budgets to go on sort of a longer improvement program. So that would be the only piece I'd add, is if you haven't got the kind of opportunity to reset, that would be the kind of starting point.
Fantastic. Deshant?
I think both Darren and Tommy have got it right on point.
Yeah.
The only thing I would like to add is I think all of us need to take as many small steps as possible rather than trying to implement everything in one go. That's never going to happen. Basically, keep chipping away at energy usage, review how existing materials can be reused or recycled. So all of these things together will really bring us to a larger goal.
Yeah.
So we at Tata Realty, we keep trying out these new initiatives. Yeah. I've been lucky enough to have a separate budget that allows me to try these initiatives. So things like
I would like
panels, air to water systems, piezo-based generation systems on walkways, you know, all of these small things which we keep trying piloting. And I believe by investing in these, we are actually helping the technology improve further. So, and like I said, everything that we can do, as many small steps as possible.
I like that idea of testing different technologies, see how they work and so forth. There's so many out there and so forth. You really have to sort of, okay, let's pilot, let's see what the outcome is. Let's keep on moving the dial forward. It doesn't work, let's grab something else, keep it moving. That's fantastic. You've got that ability to do that.
Yep.
Excellent. Look, this has been a great session. I think we could all talk for ages on it. In closing it off, you know, as technology continues to evolve, you know, rather rapidly, I want to ask you all, like, how do you envision the future of sustainable buildings in the next decade? And what does the future of smart and sustainable buildings look like? And just from what you're seeing now, what are the key trends you're seeing? Maybe, Tommy, if I can kick off with yourself, and then maybe Deshant and Darren to close off.
I think the future here is all about implementation for the next few years, at least from the technology perspective. I think we have the technologies we need. Now it's all about how do we deploy those to create buildings that work for people? How do we really focus on data-driven intelligence? So I talked earlier, you know, we're deploying a lot of sensors. Are we really getting the value out of all of these sensors? Are they really delivering real impact for us? And then finally, I think the other trend or key thing that we need to keep an eye on is this collaboration point that's come out quite clearly here. How do we work together? And I like your point, Deshant, about, you know, the small steps. How do we collaborate together and everyone keep taking small steps every day to get to that broader goal? But it is going to take cross-industry collaboration and different stakeholders working together.
I think just to add to what Tommy said, and this might be a cliche, but I believe AI is where the future is right now. I know ChatGPT has brought in AI to the forefront with everyone, but we've had AI and machine learning systems in place for a few years now. And I believe that AI, just implementing AI can revolutionize all aspects of running and maintaining a building. You can have lift schedules that can be optimized automatically, HVAC systems that become even more efficient, and even day-to-day activities like preventive maintenance can be improved. There's so many ways where AI can be implemented right now. It's just absolutely amazing.
It is. I totally agree with you. Absolutely. Darren, closing off with yourself, can you give us your review of what trends you're seeing? And I totally agree with the chance that about AI being, it's going to be, its influence is only going to grow. From your point of view?
Yeah, I totally agree with Dushan as well and Tommy as well. I mean, AI definitely it's going to be a huge game changer, right? Data-driven maintenance is going to be a big thing. And Tommy as well, in terms of, what do you use the data for, right? That's the key thing. For me, I think it's the experience. Like we mentioned earlier, tenants are getting more sophisticated, right? So I would imagine the next couple of years, I think the technology is already there. I know some buildings are already adopting it, some are already applying it. It's the experience walking into a building, might it be industrial, retail, or office. Office, for example, is the experience when you step into the building, either scan your face or QR code, depending on how you manage your privacy. The lifts will know which floor you want to go. Your seats is ready for you, right? Everything is kind of seamless, entry to exit and whatnot. Retail, I mean, there's definitely there's some technologies that's being tested out around, you walk into, say, a shopping mall, there'll be notification on your phone around where there's a sales or where should you go and things, right? One thing that we didn't talk about is accessibility, right? There are some technologies out there for the sort of the people with, that are less fortunate. There's a technology in Australia called Bindi Map, right? So it's basically a sort of a map that allows the vision impaired to navigate through a shopping mall. So, this kind of stuff is something that's important as well. And you need, like we were discussing, technology definitely plays a big part, and it's all the overall experience.
Yeah, fantastic, Darren. Look, Tommy, Dushan, Darren, loved the conversation. It was excellent. I'd love to keep on talking about it. I want to thank you all for giving up your time to be part of this today. Thank you all very much, and look forward to seeing you out there.